Marcus Chun had everything a man could want at 33. His tech empire had made him one of the youngest billionaires in San Francisco. His penthouse overlooked the Golden Gate Bridge, and his calendar was filled with meetings that moved markets. Yet lately, something had been catching his attention during his evening returns home, something that had nothing to do with stock prices or acquisition deals. Every evening, as his Blacktown car pulled into the circular driveway of his Pacific Heights mansion, Marcus noticed a small figure pressed against one of the staff quarter windows. A little girl, no more than 3 years old, with dark curls framing her face, would be there without fail. Her tiny hands would be splayed against the glass, her breath fogging the window as she waited. For what, he didn't know. But the image had begun to haunt him in a way that quarterly reports and board meetings never could. The child belonged to Elena Rodriguez, his head housekeeper. Elena had been with him for just over 6 months, hired through his property management company after his previous staff had retired. She was efficient, quiet, and kept his massive home running like clockwork. Marcus knew very little about her beyond her work. He made it a point not to get too involved with his employees' personal lives. It was cleaner that way, more professional. But that little girl in the window was making it impossible to maintain that distance. Elena was 28, though the weight she seemed to carry made her appear older in moments of stillness. Marcus had noticed that too, though he told himself he was simply being observant. She had warm brown eyes that rarely met his directly, and she moved through his home with a kind of practiced invisibility that good domestic staff cultivated. She wore her dark hair pulled back in a neat bun, and her uniform was always impeccable. She spoke only when necessary, always polite, always professional. Her daughter, Lily, was technically not supposed to be in the main house during working hours. Elena kept her in the staff quarters, a small but comfortable apartment above the garage where several of his household employees lived. Marcus had approved the arrangement when Elena was hired. She was a single mother, and he wasn't heartless enough to force her to choose between employment and childcare. But he'd never actually interacted with the child, had barely even seen her beyond those evening glimpses. Until one rainy Thursday in November. Marcus had left work early, unusual for him, driven home by a migraine that made the numbers on his computer screen swim. He'd waved off his driver and taken his own car, arriving home 2 hours before his usual time. As he pulled into the driveway, he saw her, the little girl, already at her post by the window, even though it was only 4 in the afternoon. Something about the sight made him pause instead of heading straight inside. He sat in his car, rain drumming on the roof, and watched. The child's face was pressed so close to the glass that her nose was squashed flat. Her small hands were in their usual position, and she was completely still, her attention fixed on the driveway with an intensity that seemed far too serious for someone so young. Then he saw Elena appear behind the child, gently pulling her back from the window. Even from this distance, Marcus could see the exhaustion in Elena's posture, the way she bent down to speak to her daughter. Lily shook her head adamantly, her curls bouncing, and immediately returned to the window the moment her mother's hands left her shoulders. Elena said something else, her expression a mixture of patience and sadness, then disappeared from view, leaving the child to her vigil. Marcus found himself getting out of the car despite the rain, walking not to his main entrance, but toward the external stairs that led to the staff quarters. He didn't stop to question why. He only knew that something about this scene had burrowed under his skin, and he needed to understand what he was seeing. He knocked on the door to Elena's apartment. The sound of small, running feet preceded the door opening to reveal Elena, her eyes widening in surprise and then concern as she registered who was standing in the rain outside her door. "Mr. Chen, I'm so sorry. Is something wrong? Do you need something from the house?" She immediately stepped into professional mode, her hands smoothing her uniform even though it was already perfect. "No, nothing's wrong," Marcus said, suddenly feeling foolish. What was he doing here? I've noticed your daughter. In the window. Every evening." Elena's face transformed, a deep flush creeping up her neck. "I'm so sorry, sir. I've tried to keep her away from the windows facing the main house. It won't happen again. She's just at that age where she doesn't always listen." "That's not why I'm here," Marcus interrupted, holding up a hand. "I'm not complaining. I'm just curious. What is she waiting for?" Elena's mouth opened and then closed. Her eyes, for the first time since he'd known her, met his directly, and he saw something raw there: shame, pain, and a desperate kind of hope. She looked like she might close the door, might retreat into the professional distance they'd maintained. But then she glanced back into her apartment, where he could just see Lily returning to her post, and something in her seemed to break. "Her father," Elena said quietly. "She's waiting for her father." The words hung in the rain-soaked air between them. Marcus felt his chest tighten in a way that was entirely unfamiliar, a pull of empathy so strong it was almost physical. "He used to come home at 6, Elena continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "Every evening, regular as clockwork. She'd wait by the window of our old apartment, and when she saw his car, she'd run to the door. He'd scoop her up and spin her around, and she'd laugh like it was the best moment of her entire day." Elena's voice cracked slightly. She was only 2.5 when he died. A car accident on the 101. But she still waits. Every evening. She doesn't really understand that he's not coming back. Marcus stood frozen, rain soaking through his expensive suit, his migraine forgotten. He thought of all the evenings he'd seen that small figure in the window, thought of the patience of a child too young to understand permanence, too young to understand that some people, once gone, never return. "I keep trying to explain it to her," Elena said, tears now mixing with the rain on her face. "But how do you explain death to someone who barely understands yesterday and tomorrow? She just knows her daddy is late, and if she waits long enough, he'll come home." The conversation at Elena's door lasted only a few minutes more. Marcus, for perhaps the first time in his adult life, found himself completely without words. He'd built an empire on his ability to read situations, to find solutions, to optimize and improve. But standing there in the rain, facing a young mother's grief and a child's incomprehensible loss, all his talents seemed worthless. He'd mumbled something inadequate. "I'm sorry for your loss," and Elena had retreated back into her professional shell, apologizing again for any disturbance Lily might have caused. Marcus had returned to his house, changed out of his wet clothes, and tried to focus on the work he'd brought home. But the image of that little girl's face pressed against the window wouldn't leave him. That night, he did something he never did. He poured himself a whiskey and stood at his own window, looking out at the staff quarters. He could see the lit window of Elena's apartment, could imagine Lily already asleep, her vigil ended for another day, only to begin again tomorrow. David Rodriguez had been 29 when he died. Marcus knew this because, later that evening, he'd done what he always did when faced with something he didn't understand. He researched. A quick search had brought up the accident report, the obituary, a few social media profiles that painted a picture of a young man who'd worked in construction, who'd loved his family, who'd been in the wrong place at the wrong time when a semi-truck driver fell asleep at the wheel. The obituary mentioned his wife, Elena, and his daughter, Lily. It mentioned his parents in Mexico, his 3 brothers, and a community that would miss him. It was dated 8 months ago, which meant Elena had lost her husband, had somehow picked herself up, had found this job and moved to a new city, all while caring for a toddler who couldn't understand why her world had shattered. Marcus slept poorly that night, plagued by dreams of waiting children and empty driveways. The next morning, he found himself doing another unusual thing, leaving his bedroom earlier than necessary and going to the kitchen while Elena was still working there, preparing his breakfast. She looked up as he entered, surprise flashing across her face before she composed herself. "Good morning, Mr. Chun. Your coffee will be ready in just a moment. I wasn't expecting you down so early." "Elena," he said, and then paused, unsure of what he actually wanted to say. "I've been thinking about yesterday. About Lily." Her hands stilled on the coffee press. "Sir, I promise it won't interfere with my work. I can arrange for her." "No," he interrupted. "That's not what I mean. I was wondering, what does Lily do during the day? While you're working?" Elena's expression became guarded. "I have a neighbor who watches her in the apartment. Mrs. Chun, no relation to you, I think," she added with the ghost of a smile. "She's an older woman, very kind. Lily is well cared for." Marcus nodded slowly. "And what about childcare? Preschool? Does she have friends her age?" "We can't afford preschool right now," Elena said simply. "But she's learning her colors and numbers with Mrs. Chun. And she's happy enough. Children are resilient, everyone says." But Marcus heard what she didn't say, that Lily spent her days in a small apartment with an elderly babysitter, that she had no playmates, no yard to run in, no space to be the energetic 3-year-old she should be. That Elena was doing the best she could with what she had, but it wasn't nearly what she would have wanted for her daughter. Over the following weeks, Marcus found himself increasingly aware of the small family living in his staff quarters. He learned, through careful observation and the occasional question that he tried to make seem casual, that Elena's husband had left no life insurance. That she'd moved to San Francisco because her sister lived in Oakland and it was the closest family she had. But childcare was so expensive that taking this live-in position had been the only viable option. That she sent money to David's parents in Mexico when she could, because they'd lost their son, and she felt they deserved that connection to their granddaughter. He learned that Elena woke at 5:30 every morning, got Lily dressed and fed before Mrs. Chin arrived at 7, then worked 12-hour days managing his household. She did the work of 3 people, coordinating with his other staff, managing vendors, ensuring everything ran perfectly. And she did it all while grieving, while raising a daughter alone, while watching that daughter wait every evening for a father who would never come. Marcus began coming home earlier. He told himself it was because he was delegating better, trusting his team more. But the truth was that he wanted to see Lily at the window. He wanted to bear witness to her waiting, though he couldn't have explained why if someone had asked. One evening in early December, as his car pulled up and he saw Lily's small silhouette in the usual place, he made a decision. Instead of going into the main house, he climbed the stairs to Elena's apartment and knocked. Elena answered, still in her work uniform, Lily visible behind her legs. The little girl peeked around her mother with curious dark eyes that looked just like Elena's. "Mr. Chun is everything." "I want to ask you something," Marcus said. "And I want you to think about it before you answer. No pressure and no consequences for your job if you say no." Elena's expression was wary, but she nodded. "What if Lily didn't have to wait by the window anymore?" he asked. "What if she had something else to look forward to at the end of the day?" Elena blinked, confused. "I don't understand, sir." Marcus took a breath. "I have a gate at the bottom of the driveway. What if every evening when I come home, I stop the car there and press the button to open it? What if that became Lily's signal? Not that her father is coming home, but that someone is here, someone she can see and wave to. It's not the same, I know that. But maybe it's something?" He saw Elena's eyes fill with tears. "Mr. Chin, you don't have to." "I know I don't have to," Marcus said quietly. "But I want to, if you'll let me." Elena looked down at Lily, who was still watching Marcus with those serious, considering eyes. Then she looked back up at him, and he saw something shift in her expression, a crack in the wall of professional distance, a glimpse of the grieving woman behind the efficient employee. "Okay," she whispered. "We can try." The next evening, Marcus felt ridiculously nervous as his car approached the gate. He'd instructed his driver, Thomas, about the new routine, though he hadn't explained why. As they reached the bottom of the driveway, Marcus looked up at the staff quarters window. Lily was there, as always, her small hands pressed against the glass. Marcus rolled down his window and waved before pressing the button for the gate. At first, Lily didn't react. She just stared, her expression unchanged. Marcus felt a sinking sensation. Of course this wouldn't work. How foolish to think such a simple gesture could mean anything to a child waiting for her father. But then, as the gate began to swing open, Lily's hand lifted from the glass. Slowly, uncertainly, she waved back. It was the smallest thing, that little wave. But Marcus felt something warm spread through his chest, something he hadn't felt in longer than he could remember. He waved again, bigger this time, and then Thomas drove through the gate as it opened fully. The next evening, Lily was at the window earlier than usual. This time, when Marcus stopped at the gate and waved, her response was immediate. She waved enthusiastically, both hands moving back and forth, her face breaking into a smile. By the end of the week, it had become a ritual. Marcus would stop, wave, and Lily would wave back. Sometimes she'd jump up and down. Once, she pressed her whole face against the glass, making Marcus laugh out loud, something that startled Thomas so much he nearly stalled the car. Marcus began to find excuses to leave work earlier to ensure he'd be home before Lily's bedtime. He started to notice other things too. He'd see Elena taking Lily for walks around the property in the early morning before the day got busy. The little girl would toddle along the paths, stopping to examine every flower, every interesting stone. Elena would follow patiently, her exhaustion visible, but her attention always fully on her daughter. One Saturday, Marcus was working in his home office when he heard laughter from the garden. He looked out to see Elena's sister had come to visit, a woman in her early 30s with two young boys around Lily's age. The three children were playing on the lawn, and Marcus watched as Lily ran and shrieked and played with an energy he'd never seen from her before. Elena and her sister sat on a bench, talking, and for the first time since he'd known her, Elena looked her age, young, pretty, unguarded in her joy at seeing her daughter play. Marcus made another decision then. He called his property manager and asked about the grounds. There was a section beyond the pool house he knew that was rarely used. Could it be converted into a play area? With equipment, maybe a sandbox? The manager was surprised, but agreed to draw up plans. The play area was installed before Christmas, though Marcus made sure Elena thought it was something his property manager had suggested for increasing the home's value. He watched from his office window as Lily discovered the swings, the small slide, the playhouse. Her squeals of delight carried through the winter air, and Marcus found himself smiling at his laptop, his conference call temporarily forgotten. "Marcus, are you listening?" His CFO's voice came through the speakers. "Sorry," Marcus said, dragging his attention back to the spreadsheet on his screen. "Could you repeat that last part?" But his mind kept drifting. He was thinking about what else the space needed. Maybe some flowers that would bloom in spring. Maybe a small vegetable garden. Kids liked growing things, didn't they? He was thinking about these things when Elena knocked on his office door later that day. She looked uncertain, her hands clasped in front of her. "Mr. Chin, do you have a moment?" "Of course. Come in." She stepped inside but didn't sit, even when he gestured to the chair across from his desk. "I wanted to thank you," she said, "for the play area. I know you said it was for property value, but thank you. Lily hasn't stopped talking about the swings. Marcus felt heat creep up his neck. It was nothing. The space was just sitting there. It's not nothing to us, Elena said softly. She met his eyes then, really met them, and Marcus saw something there he couldn't quite name. You've been very kind. The waving every evening, the play area. You didn't have to do any of it. Maybe I wanted to, Marcus heard himself say. The air in the office seemed to shift, to grow heavy with something unspoken. Elena's lips parted as if she might say something more, but then she seemed to catch herself. She nodded once and turned to leave. Elena, Marcus called after her. She paused at the door. How is Lily doing? With everything? Elena was quiet for a long moment. She still waits by the window, she admitted. But now when she sees your car, she gets excited. She calls you the wave man. She's starting to understand that some people leave and come back. It's not the same as her father coming home, but it's teaching her that not everyone who leaves is gone forever. Does that make sense? It did. It made more sense than Marcus wanted to admit. He nodded, not trusting his voice. After Elena left, Marcus sat at his desk for a long time, staring at nothing. He was 33 years old, one of the most successful entrepreneurs of his generation, and he'd just been called the wave man by a 3-year-old. It should have felt absurd. Instead, it felt like the most important title he'd ever earned. Christmas approached, and Marcus found himself doing something else out of character, shopping for gifts. Not the impersonal corporate gifts his assistant usually handled, but actual, thoughtful presents. For Elena, he chose a high-end coffee maker for her apartment, remembering how she always drank the cheap instant kind. For Lily, he spent an embarrassing amount of time in a toy store, finally selecting a stuffed elephant that the sales clerk assured him was the most popular item for 3-year-olds. He had them wrapped and left them outside Elena's door on Christmas Eve, and signed, telling himself that this was just what good employers did. The thank you note Elena slipped under his office door the next day, her handwriting elegant and heartfelt, stayed on his desk for 3 days before he finally filed it away. The winter passed. The wave ritual continued every evening without fail. Marcus found himself scheduling meetings around it, making sure he was always home by 6. His business partners noticed the change, commenting that he seemed more balanced, less driven. Marcus didn't tell them the truth, that the highlight of his day had become a 5-second interaction with a toddler at a window. In February, on a particularly cold evening, Marcus saw that Lily wasn't at the window at her usual time. He felt a spike of worry that he immediately told himself was ridiculous, but he found himself texting Elena anyway, something he'd never done before. Is everything all right? The response came 5 minutes later. Lily has a fever. Doctor says it's just a cold, but she's feeling miserable. Sorry she missed the wave. Marcus stared at his phone. Then, without overthinking it, he walked to the kitchen, asked a chef to prepare some chicken soup, and took it to Elena's apartment himself. She answered the door in sweatpants and an old t-shirt, her hair loose around her shoulders. The first time he'd ever seen her out of uniform. She looked younger, more vulnerable, and Marcus had to remind himself to focus. Soup, he said, holding up the container. My mom always said it helped when I was sick. Elena's eyes widened, then filled with tears. Mr. Chen, I thank you. That's incredibly kind. He heard a small, miserable cough from inside the apartment. How is she? Sad that she missed you, Elena said with a tired smile. She asked if the wave man would still come tomorrow. Marcus felt that warm sensation in his chest again. Tell her I'll wave twice tomorrow. Once for today, once for tomorrow. She'll love that. They stood there for a moment, neither quite knowing how to end the interaction. Finally, Marcus stepped back. Let me know if you need anything. And don't worry about work tomorrow if you need to stay with her. Thank you, Elena said again, her voice thick with emotion. As Marcus walked back to his house, he realized something that should have terrified him but somehow didn't. He was starting to care about these two people in a way that went far beyond employer and employee. He was starting to look forward to coming home not because of the luxury and comfort awaiting him, but because of a little girl's wave and her mother's quiet strength. He was starting to feel like these strangers living in his staff quarters were becoming something else entirely. He was starting to feel like they were becoming his family. Section 4. The Breakthrough. March brought rain to San Francisco, the kind of persistent drizzle that turned the city gray and made everyone move a little slower, a little more carefully. Marcus had been in Seattle for 3 days on business, the longest he'd been away since starting his wave ritual with Lily. He'd thought about them more than he wanted to admit. Wondered if Lily was waiting by the window for a car that wouldn't come. Wondered if Elena was managing everything alone. Wondered when he'd started thinking of his staff quarters as something other than just another part of his property investment. His plane touched down at SFO on a Friday evening, and Marcus surprised himself by declining his driver's offer to stop for dinner. He wanted to get home. Needed to, though he didn't examine that need too closely. The rain was heavy as his car wound through the city streets toward Pacific Heights. Marcus found himself checking his watch, 6:15. Past Lily's usual window time, but maybe she'd still be there. Maybe Elena had told her he was coming back today. As they turned onto his street, Thomas's phone rang through the car's speakers. Marcus almost told him to ignore it, but the property manager's name flashed on the screen. Mr. Chun, I apologize for calling so late, but I thought you should know there's been an incident at the property. Marcus felt his stomach drop. What kind of incident? Is anyone hurt? No, nothing like that. It's just there was a pipe burst in the staff quarters this afternoon. Significant water damage to the Rodriguez apartment. I've had a crew working on it all evening, but the apartment won't be habitable for at least a week, maybe 2. Ms. Rodriguez and her daughter are currently in temporary housing at a hotel downtown, but I wanted to know your preference for. They're at a hotel? Which one? Marcus interrupted. The Courtyard on Van Ness. It was the closest option with availability, but... Have them brought back to my house, Marcus said immediately. There are 6 guest bedrooms sitting empty. They can stay in one of those while the apartment is being repaired. There was a pause. Sir, are you certain? The hotel is perfectly adequate, and company policy regarding staff staying in the main residence. I'm certain.
Call them now.
Tell them to come back. Thomas glanced at Marcus in the rearview mirror, but said nothing. Marcus met his eyes briefly, daring him to comment. The driver wisely kept his thoughts to himself. By the time they arrived home, another car was already pulling up, Elena's sister's Honda, with Elena and Lily inside. Marcus got out in the rain, not bothering with an umbrella, and walked over as Elena stepped out of the passenger seat. She looked exhausted, her eyes red-rimmed, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. Mr. Chun, I'm so sorry. I told your property manager we'd be fine at the hotel, but he insisted. He was following my instructions, Marcus said. You're not staying at some hotel when there are empty rooms here. Come on, let's get Lily inside. She'll catch cold in this rain. Elena's sister, Isabella, got out and opened the back door, unbuckling a very quiet, very overwhelmed-looking Lily. The little girl's eyes were wide, her stuffed elephant clutched tight to her chest. The one Marcus had given her for Christmas, he noticed. Wave man, Lily said softly when she saw Marcus. Something in his chest cracked open. He crouched down to her level, rain soaking through his suit. Hi, Lily. I heard you had a rough day. How about we get you somewhere warm and dry? She nodded solemnly, then surprised him by reaching out her free hand. Marcus took it carefully, her small fingers wrapping around two of his. Her hand was so tiny, so trusting, and Marcus felt the full weight of that trust settle over him like a mantle. They went inside together, an odd procession, the billionaire holding hands with a 3-year-old, followed by 2 worried sisters carrying overnight bags and a soaked stuffed elephant. Mrs. Martinez, his head chef, appeared in the hallway and immediately took charge in the way that maternal women do, ushering them all toward the kitchen and promising hot chocolate and cookies. Marcus stood in his marble foyer, dripping on the expensive tile, watching Elena kneel down to remove Lily's wet shoes. The little girl was looking around with wide eyes, taking in the high ceilings, the chandelier, the artwork that cost more than most people's houses. But she wasn't looking at it with greed or envy. She was looking at it with simple wonder, the way children do when the world is still full of magic. "This place is big," Lily whispered to her mother. "Very big," Elena agreed softly. "And we're very lucky that Mr. Chen is letting us stay here while our home is being fixed." "Will the wave man be here too?" Lily asked. Elena glanced up at Marcus, something complicated in her expression. "Yes, honey. Mr. Chen lives here." "Good," Lily said firmly. "Then we can wave at each other inside." Marcus surprised himself by laughing, a real laugh, not the practice chuckle he used in board meetings. "We can definitely do that." Over hot chocolate in the kitchen, Isabella pulled him aside. "Mr. Chen, I want you to know how much we appreciate this. Elena's been through hell this year, and you've been incredibly kind. More than kind." "It's just a room," Marcus said uncomfortably. "No," Isabella said, her dark eyes serious. "It's not just a room. You see them. That's what matters. Most people look right through domestic workers, through single mothers, through grieving families. But you see them. You see my sister fighting to keep it together for her daughter. You see that baby girl waiting for a father who's never coming home. And you decided to do something about it, even though you didn't have to. That's not nothing." Marcus didn't know what to say to that. He was saved from responding by Lily's voice calling from the kitchen table. "Wave man, can I see your house?" Elena immediately started to object, but Marcus held up a hand. "Actually, I'd be happy to give you a tour. If that's okay with your mom?" Elena looked between him and Lily, uncertainty written across her face. But Lily was already sliding off her chair, reaching for Marcus's hand again, with complete trust. After a moment, Elena nodded. The tour started in the formal rooms, the living room with its floor-to-ceiling windows, the dining room that seated 20, the library with its walls of books. Lily was appropriately impressed, but clearly didn't understand why anyone needed so much space. But when they got to Marcus's home office, she stopped in the doorway, staring. "You can see my window from here," she said, pointing. Marcus followed her gaze and realized she was right. From his desk, he had a perfect view of the staff quarters, of the very window where she'd spent months waiting. Had he been unconsciously positioning himself to see her? Had some part of him been keeping vigil too? "I can," he agreed quietly. "I've seen you there, waiting." "For Daddy," Lily said matter-of-factly. "But he's not coming. Mommy says he's in heaven with the angels." Marcus felt Elena tense beside him. This was clearly territory they were still navigating, this understanding of death through a 3-year-old's eyes. "Your mommy's right," Marcus said carefully. "And I bet your daddy wishes he could be here with you." Lily considered this, her little forehead wrinkling in thought. "But you wave at me every day." "I do." "That's nice," she declared. "You're nice." Marcus felt his throat tighten. When was the last time someone had called him nice and meant it the way this child did? Simply, honestly, without wanting anything in return. That night, after Elena had put Lily to bed in one of the guest rooms, she found Marcus in his study. He was pretending to work, but mostly thinking about small hands and simple declarations of niceness. "Mr. Chen," Elena said from the doorway. "May I come in?" "Please." "And Elena, when we're not in a formal work situation, you can call me Marcus." She stepped inside, but remained standing. "I don't know how to thank you for all of this. The room, the tour, the kindness you've shown Lily. She hasn't smiled like that in months." "She's a wonderful kid," Marcus said honestly. "You're doing an amazing job with her." Elena's eyes filled with tears. "Some days I'm not sure about that. Some days I feel like I'm drowning, and I'm going to take her down with me. David was the fun parent, the playful one. I'm just trying to keep us afloat." "Elena," Marcus stood up, moving around his desk without thinking. "You're not just keeping her afloat. You're raising a kind, curious, resilient little girl who still finds joy despite everything she's lost. That's not just surviving. That's incredible." A tear spilled down Elena's cheek. "She asked me yesterday if you were going to be her new daddy. I didn't know what to say." The words hung in the air between them. Marcus felt like he was standing on the edge of something vast and terrifying and necessary. "What did you tell her?" he asked quietly. "I told her you were a friend. A very good friend." Elena wiped at her eyes. "I hope that was okay." "It was more than okay," Marcus said. And then, because he couldn't seem to stop himself, "Is that what I am? A friend?" Elena looked up at him, and for the first time, there was no professional distance in her gaze. "I don't know what you are, Marcus. I just know that my daughter waits for you every evening like you're the best part of her day. And I know that when I see your car pull up, I feel less alone. And that terrifies me because you're my employer, and this is complicated, and I can't afford to lose this job or this stability, but, Marcus prompted when she trailed off. "But I think we've stopped being just employer and employee somewhere along the way," Elena finished softly. "And I don't know what we are instead." Marcus took a step closer. They were in his office, in his mansion on his property. By every practical measure, he held all the power in this dynamic. But standing there looking at Elena, at her tear-stained face and her honest eyes and her vulnerable courage, he felt powerless in a way that had nothing to do with money or status. "I don't know either," he admitted, "but I'd like to figure out. If you want to." Elena held his gaze for a long moment, and Marcus could see her thinking, weighing, considering all the complications and risks. Finally, she nodded. "I'd like that too." Neither of them moved to close the distance between them. It wasn't time for that yet. But something had shifted, some barrier had fallen, and as Elena left his office and returned to the guest room where her daughter slept, Marcus knew that his carefully ordered life had just become beautifully, terrifyingly complicated. And for the first time in years, he was excited to see what tomorrow would bring. The week that Elena and Lily were supposed to stay in the main house stretched into 2, then 3. The repairs to the staff quarters were taking longer than expected. There'd been more damage than initially assessed, and Marcus found himself approving increasingly extensive renovations. A new bathroom, updated flooring, better insulation. A small kitchen renovation that the property manager insisted wasn't necessary, but Marcus insisted upon anyway. No one commented on the fact that Marcus seemed to be finding reasons to extend the timeline. Least of all Elena, who'd stopped asking when they could move back after the first week. Life in the main house had fallen into a rhythm that felt both strange and natural. Lily would wake up early and pad down the hallway to Marcus's room, knocking softly until he answered. He'd started setting his alarm 30 minutes earlier just to have coffee with her before the day began. Well, his coffee and her milk with a splash of coffee that made her feel very grown up. They'd sit in the breakfast nook, watching the sunrise over the bay, and Lily would tell him important 3-year-old things about the dreams she had about elephants, about how blue was her favorite color today, but maybe tomorrow it would be purple, about how she missed her daddy, but the wave man was nice too. Elena would join them eventually, always apologizing for Lily's intrusion, always reminding her daughter that Mr. Chin was a busy man with important work. But her protests had grown weaker, and Marcus noticed she'd started smiling when she found them together, a soft, wondering smile that made his heart do complicated things in his chest. The evenings had changed too. The wave ritual continued, but now Marcus would come inside to find Lily waiting in the foyer, ready to tell him about her day. She'd take his hand and lead him to wherever Elena was working, chattering the whole way, and Marcus found himself sharing his own day in return. He told her about difficult meetings and stubborn board members, and she'd pat his hand consolingly and tell him that maybe they just needed a cookie to feel better. One evening in mid-April, Marcus came home to find Lily waiting as usual, but her face was tear-stained. Elena was there too, looking exhausted and worried. "What's wrong?" Marcus asked immediately, crouching down. "It's Daddy's birthday," Lily said, her lower lip trembling. "Mommy says we're going to the cemetery to bring him flowers, but I don't want to. It's too sad there." Marcus looked up at Elena, who had tears in her own eyes. "We go every month," she said quietly. "But this is the first birthday since, and Lily's been upset all day." Marcus made a decision. "What if we brought the flowers here instead?" Elena blinked. "What do you mean?" "The garden. What if we planted something for David? A memorial garden that Lily could visit whenever she wanted, without having to go to the cemetery? She could help plan it, help take care of it. It could be a happy place to remember him, not a sad one." Lily's head lifted. "Could I plant the flowers myself?" "Absolutely," Marcus said. "We'll plant them tomorrow. A whole section of the garden, just for your daddy." Elena was crying openly now, but she was nodding. He would have loved that. He always wanted a garden, but we could never afford a house with a yard. The next day was Saturday, and Marcus canceled his morning meetings. He, Elena, and Lily spent 3 hours in the garden, planting roses and lavender and David's favorite flowers, sunflowers, which Elena said he loved because they always turned toward the light. Lily got dirt all over her dress and her face and seemed happier than Marcus had ever seen her. "Daddy would like these," she declared, patting down the soil around a sunflower plant. "They're cheerful." "He would," Elena agreed, her voice thick. She glanced at Marcus over Lily's head, and the gratitude in her eyes was so intense it was almost painful to see. That evening, after Lily had gone to bed, Elena and Marcus sat on the back terrace, overlooking the garden where the newly planted memorial section was just visible in the dusk. "You didn't have to do that," Elena said softly. "Any of this. The room, the extended stay, the garden, you didn't have to do any of it." "I know," Marcus said, "but I wanted to. Elena, I need to tell you something." She turned to look at him, and in the fading light, she was so beautiful it made his chest ache. Not just physically beautiful, though she was that, but beautiful in her strength, in her fierce love for her daughter, in the way she'd rebuilt her life from ruins and refused to let grief consume her. "These past few months," Marcus continued, "watching you and Lily, being part of your lives even in this small way, it's changed something in me. I've spent years building a company, making money, achieving success. And I never questioned whether any of it mattered because that's what success looked like, right? That's what winning looked like." "Marcus, let me finish," he said gently. "When I saw Lily at that window the first time, really saw her, something cracked open in me. And then I learned her story, your story, and I realized how hollow my life had been. how I'd been going through the motions of living without actually feeling anything. You two woke me up. Elena was quiet for a long moment. What are you saying? Marcus took a deep breath. I'm saying that I don't want you to move back to the staff quarters. I'm saying that I want you and Lily here, in the main house, not as employees, but as family. I'm saying that I've fallen in love with your daughter's laugh and her trust, and the way she calls me Wave Man. And I'm saying that I've fallen in love with you too, with your courage and your kindness, and the way you've never once made me feel like my money was what mattered. He heard Elena's sharp intake of breath. Marcus, I can't. We can't afford to lose this job. If this doesn't work out, then you'll still have the job, Marcus said firmly. Elena, I'm not trying to put you in an impossible position. If you don't feel the same way, if you want to keep things professional, we'll make it work. I'll have the staff quarters remodeled beautifully, you'll move back, and I'll still wave at Lily every evening. Nothing bad will happen to you, or Lily, no matter what you decide. But what if I do feel the same way? Elena whispered. What if I've been falling for you too, a little bit every day, even though I told myself it was impossible? What if Lily's already attached to you, already thinks of you as part of our family? What if we take this risk and it works? Marcus reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away. She didn't. He took her hand, feeling the calluses from hard work, feeling the strength in her fingers. Then maybe we find out what it's like to be happy. Really happy. All three of us. I don't know how to do this, Elena admitted. Date a billionaire. Navigate whatever this is. I'm a widow with a 3-year-old and a high school education. Your world and mine are so different. Then we'll figure it out together, Marcus said. One day at a time. One wave at a time. Elena laughed, a watery sound that was half sob. She's going to be impossible when she finds out. She already tells everyone that you're her friend. I am her friend, Marcus said. And I'd like to be more, if you'll let me. My daughter asks about you constantly. She saves stories to tell you. She draws you pictures. Marcus, she's 3 years old, and she's already lost one father figure. If we do this, if we try this, you have to be sure. Because if you leave... I won't, Marcus interrupted. Elena, I've made a lot of promises in my life. Business promises, financial promises. But I've never made a promise like this. I'm not going anywhere. Not from you. Not from Lily. However this unfolds, whatever we become to each other, I'm committed to being in both of your lives. Elena was fully crying now, and Marcus pulled her close, letting her rest her head on his shoulder. They sat like that as full darkness fell, as the lights in the garden came on, illuminating David's memorial flowers. He would have liked you, Elena said finally. David. He had a big heart, always helping people, always seeing the best in everyone. He would have liked that you've been kind to his girls. I wish I could have met him, Marcus said honestly. Any man who raised a daughter that wonderful and married a woman like you must have been pretty special. He was, Elena agreed. And so are you. They started dating, if you could call it that, when they lived in the same house. Marcus took them out, to the aquarium, to the children's museum, to parks and playgrounds. Lily delighted in every outing, and Marcus discovered he delighted in her delight. He learned that 3-year-olds asked an infinite number of questions, that they had opinions about everything, and that their joy was unfiltered and contagious. He learned that Elena was funny once she relaxed, that she could debate politics and philosophy, that she had dreams she'd set aside but hadn't forgotten. He learned that she was fiercer than she appeared, that she'd fight like a lion for her daughter, and that her capacity for love hadn't been diminished by loss. If anything, it had been refined, made purer and stronger. 6 months later, on a cool October evening, Marcus got down on one knee in David's garden, surrounded by sunflowers that had grown tall and bright, turning their faces toward the sun just as David had taught them. Lily was there, holding the ring box because Marcus had asked her permission first, had told her that he wanted to be part of their family officially if that was okay with her. "Will you still wave at me every day?" Lily had asked seriously. "Every single day," Marcus had promised. "Okay then. You can marry Mommy." Now, as he proposed to Elena with their daughter watching and the flowers David had loved swaying in the breeze, Marcus felt the rightness of it all. This hadn't been his plan. Falling in love with his housekeeper and her daughter, building a life around a nightly wave and a little girl's grief, none of it matched the future he'd imagined for himself. But it was so much better than anything he could have imagined. "Yes," Elena said through happy tears. "Yes, of course, yes." Lily cheered and threw herself at both of them, and they fell into a tangle of hugs and laughter and tears there in the garden. And Marcus thought about that first day he'd really seen Lily in the window, waiting. He'd asked Elena why she waited, and the answer had broken his heart. But now Lily didn't wait by the window anymore. Now she ran to the door every evening, knowing that Marcus would be there, that he'd wave at her, and then come inside and be present and stay. She'd learned that some people, once they come into your life, don't leave. That family could be made as well as born. That sometimes the people you're waiting for come to you in unexpected ways. And Marcus had learned too. He'd learned that success wasn't measured in dollars or deals, but in small hands trusting yours, in tears dried and gardens planted, in showing up day after day for the people who mattered. He'd learned that love could bloom in the most unexpected places, between a man who'd never thought about family and a woman who thought her chance at love was over, between a billionaire and a maid, between a child missing her father and a man who'd never known he wanted to be one. The window that Lily used to wait by remained empty now. But every evening, as Marcus's car pulled up to the house he now shared with his soon-to-be wife and daughter, he'd look up at it anyway. And he'd remember the little girl who'd waited there, the question he'd finally asked, and the family he'd found in the answer. He'd wave at the empty window, at the past, at the grieving child Lily had been, and the joyful one she'd become. And then he'd go inside to the family waiting for him, the family he'd chosen and who'd chosen him back. Some people are worth waiting for. Some people are worth changing your entire life for. And some people, the very lucky ones, get to come home to love every single evening. Marcus Chun was, he realized, one of the very lucky ones indeed.